But let's be clear, we can win a victory, but that other way will be still trying to make the working class pay, still trying to make ordinary people pay. So intrinsic to this movement has to also be raising a socialist alternative. In the end, the reason we've got this public sector debt, the reason we're all being asked to pay, is because of a crisis of capitalism. The worst crisis in 70 years. This is a system which does not work, which is less and less able to meet the needs of humanity. As a result of the recession, there are now more than 1 billion people worldwide who do not have enough to eat. Most of those are in the poor countries of the world. But there are 57 million people in the US who don't know where their next meal is coming from, the richest country on the planet. What does that say about capitalism? Worldwide, 13% of young people are unemployed. Here in Britain, 69 graduates applying for every single job. We need a better kind of system. We want a democratic socialist system. We don't accept the will of the markets. These supposedly neutral democratic bodies that are telling us we've got no choice but to accept cuts. They're not neutral democratic bodies. They're a bunch of billionaires who are after the next buck. There was a little article which Joe Higgins, our MEP, found in the New York Times from the beginning of this year, the spring, which was a banquet of the 18 biggest hedge funds in the world. And they came together to discuss how they were going to make money out of Europe. And they decided Greece is the weak point, we're going to drive Greece out of the Eurozone and we can make ourselves a pretty penny. Millions of people's living standards have been driven into the dirt because the markets want to make a profit. So we don't accept the will of the markets. We say, firstly, the rich should be made to pay for the crisis. The PCS, the Civil Servants Union, have worked out there's £150 billion in unpaid taxes, overwhelmingly from the rich every single year, and they should be made to pay. But I heard a debate between Mark Savotka and John Redwood from the Tory party. Mark Savotka's the leader of the Civil Servants Union. And Mark Savotka made some very good points. John Redwood said in response, the markets won't wear it. The markets won't be willing to pay up. And actually, he's right. The rich will not be prepared to pay those taxes. But what does it say about capitalism? That if you're a single parent who gets an extra fiver in benefit, then you will have that deducted, you could face prison for it. And if you're a billionaire marketeer who says you don't want to pay taxes, then you just get away scot-free. But that's the reality of capitalism. And that's why just raising tax the rich, right as that is not enough. We have to go further. Nationalise the banking system under democratic workers' control of the people who use the banking system. Not like the nationalisation of Northern Rock that New Labour did, and of course then they did most of the rest of the banks as well, as they collapsed one after the other. But Northern Rock continued to repossess houses faster than any other mortgage provider on the high street. We don't want that kind of nationalisation. We want nationalised industry run in the interests of ordinary people, democratically controlled. We'd start with the banks, but even that's not enough. We go further and bring the big companies that dominate the British economy into democratic public ownership, so it could be planned to meet the needs of the population, so that the 100,000 building workers on the dole could be put to work to build the houses that the 5 million people who want social housing need. So that instead of, despite mass unemployment, still having more people who have to work more than 48 hours a week in Britain than any other country in Europe, we could share out the work, get rid of unemployment, and at the same time mean that nobody had to work themselves into the ground. They're the kind of measures that we take. I've got to shut up. I'll just give one last sentence. Some of you will be thinking, well, it's a nice idea, but it's utopian. It would never work. Actually, even the capitalists themselves dimly recognise that a socialist planned economy is the only permanent way out of the crisis. Some of you might have heard this before, but there's a man called Alan Greenspan who used to be the head of the US Federal Reserve. It's the big state bank in America. And during the boom, he was hailed as a god, as the man who had saved the world economy, had kept it going. Then the crash came, and he was reviled as a demon, the one who was single-handedly responsible to bringing the world economy to its knees. So he had to go and give evidence to explain what he'd done and why. And his response was, unless there is a societal choice to abandon dynamic markets and leverage for some sort of central planning, I fear that preventing bubbles will in the end turn out to be unfeasible. In other words, we would call it democratic socialist planning, not central planning. But in other words, he recognised that socialism is the only way out of the crisis. He can get away with saying that in public at the moment, because there aren't yet millions of people who are campaigning for socialist ideas, but on the basis of the struggles that we're going into, the crisis of capitalism, there is no question that socialism will be the wave of the future, and it will become an idea not just for hundreds or thousands, but for millions of people.